How's it going, everybody? We are Zone Defense. I'm Drew, joined by my co-hosts Chris and Ryan. This is our first episode after we rebranded away from the Untitled Sports broadcast. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Zone Defense Podcast, on Twitter at Zone Defense Pod, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Zone Defense Podcast. And be sure to ring that bell to get those post notifications. Ryan, what are we talking about today?
Today, we're going to dive into The Last Dance. The 10-part docu-series concluded this past Sunday, and there was a lot that went down. And I know personally, I just had a lot of fun watching it. There was not much going on, so I think it was delivered in the right time.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that, Ryan. I'm really excited to talk about it today. Now that it's all concluded and stuff, we can talk about the whole series, and I really think we're going to get some good discussion in today.
Yeah, like kind of you guys already touched on, there really was not any sports going on here until I guess last Sunday when NASCAR started. I had a little sports stuff I could watch, but this was the big thing to watch, and it was really nice to just kind of go on my couch and zone out for 2 hours and just kind of get lost in 90s basketball, because obviously all this stuff happened before we were born, about 2 years before we were all born. So it was really nice to kind of just take a step back in time and learn more about Michael Jordan and just 90s and really 80s NBA too. Yeah, and kind of on that note, what was your guys' background with Michael Jordan in the 90s NBA before kind of watching this documentary?
So I would say, I watched a lot of highlights about MJ when I was younger, and really when I got into basketball. I remember going on YouTube when I was in elementary school and middle school, and just always searching for Michael Jordan highlights of different various games and seasons of his career, and it was really interesting just getting to see all that again, and it was almost like a live back to the glory days for me in terms of just my childhood. And he was a big reason why I got into basketball in the first place.
Yeah, I agree. For me, growing up, when you're a kid, they tell you that Michael Jordan's a GOAT, and you just kind of agree with it. You didn't get the chance to see him play, so you go, okay, yeah, I agree with that. Looking back on his highlights, that'll, certainly tell you the story. But I think this documentary gave me kind of like a glimpse into like what else was there going on besides MJ and the Bulls. I mean, I can't tell you how exciting it was to see how many other great teams there were in the 90s, from Malone and Stockton on the Jazz to Olajuwon on the Rockets. The 90s, in my opinion, after watching this documentary, was the best era of basketball. I think it was the golden age.
Definitely has a ton of all-time greats for sure, and it was really interesting. Some of those players got more of a spotlight than they would in just a like normal life or whatever. The ones that got outshined by MJ all the time. They got a couple moments to shine in this. You got to see just that he wasn't the only really dominant player of this decade. There was a lot of players that really wanted to beat him and could almost do it, but couldn't get it done in those 6 different championships.
Yeah, I agree. And one team that really kind of stood out to me that I didn't realize was really good was the Cavs. Like I did not know. Like I knew about the Jazz. I'm a big Reggie Miller fan, so I knew about the Pacers obviously and the Knicks and all those guys, the Suns. But the Cavs, I did not know that they were good in like the late '80s, early '90s, and that Bulls Cavs rivalry was very real. So that was something new that I learned. But for me personally, Michael Jordan's one of my favorite players. So a lot of the stuff that about the Jordan centric stuff I already knew. But in regards to like the Bulls, the Scottie Pippen, the Steve Kerr stuff that happened in episode 9 on the last night there, all that stuff was very new to me. And I also didn't even know about the drama that involved both of Jordan's retirements, because I knew they had 3 peats and Jordan retired, but I had no idea that there was so much drama with Jerry Krause and Jerry Reinsdorf and Jordan's just dealing with fame and, of course, his father's tragic passing. I didn't know any of that stuff, so that was all really new to me. Because it was all happened before we were born. So in kind of going off of that, what was everyone's favorite moments or episodes or segments? What was something that really kind of stood out to everybody?
All right, I'll dive into this first. I think one of my favorite segments of the entire thing was because I'm really heavily involved in Detroit Pistons basketball and we stink now. So seeing the teams from the Bad Boys era was very interesting, and Isaiah Thomas is also one of my favorite players of all time. And I really enjoy. I actually like the bad boy personality of that team. It was like the blue collar, get the job done team, and I really enjoyed seeing him try to overcome that team because they kind of dominated him for his first like few years in the playoffs. They actually really dominated him, with the Jordan rules and just a lot of different things that they did to slow him down and the rest of the team. And it was cool to see him finally get over the hump, but also touch back on the greatness of the bad boys.
Yeah, the Detroit Pistons were a dominant team in the early '80s, late '80s, early '90s. It was kind of sad to see Jordan beat them finally in '91, but all dynasties come to an end. I say for me, my personally favorite moment was the summer of '95 when we got to see a glimpse of what Jordan's schedule was like. While he was filming Space Jam, he was also trying to get back into shape, and I found it cool. Warner Bros. Built him like a dome, like an official sports complex dome, and he would have all these NBA like great players like Patrick Ewing and Magic Johnson come out to play basketball, just like pick up. It was
Sean Bradley.
yeah, Sean Bradley. It was just insane. I mean, he was filming all day. He was also trying to get his body back in shape, and then he would go play pickup basketball. It just shows you the greatness and his intensity of Michael Jordan.
Yeah, kind of sticking with that because that was actually one of the parts that one of my favorite moments too. I like the Jawan Howard. I'm not sure he had a nice dunk in there. He had a
I
with
saw
I
his
that.
saw
Yeah,
it.
his
a young
flat top and
Juwan.
his no shirt on. Go blue. And then the other big thing that I thought was kind of funny with that was how he said how he was like scouting the players. Like he wasn't just playing basketball for fun against with his friends and other like NBA level talent. He was scouting all the players because he was gone from the NBA for a year and a half, and that was really kind of cool to kind of see that insight on Jordan's competitive nature and how even when he's just playing a pickup game in the middle of the summer, filming with Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, that he's still trying to do scouting reports. Yeah, and I think my favorite moment was kind of also the Bad Boys stuff. I really enjoyed that. Hearing like because I watched the Bad Boys 30 for 30. So kind of to hear like the Bulls perspective on the whole handshake incident and just to see how much hatred they have, and also it was nice to see Isaiah Thomas and Bill Laimbeer get a lot of time on ESPN the following week after those episodes aired, doing a bunch of different interviews and media. But yeah, I think those are funny enough. Those are my two favorite moments too: the Space Jam stuff and the Bad Boys.
I think the it was kind of cool to see, like, because Dennis Rodman got a lot of screen time. I'm sure we'll get into him in a little bit, but it was cool to see his like almost transformation during the documentary. I like on the Bad Boys, he didn't have all the crazy piercings or hair or anything, and gradually as it got closer to like the Last Dance, you could see him just kind of transfer over, and then the hair colors and would change, and he got a little crazier and crazier. I thought that was really interesting. He was a big symbol of the Bad Boys and also the Bulls teams in terms of their toughness.
Yeah, I really loved when he showed up to practice in pajama pants and then of course his big Las Vegas, whatever that was, 3 or 4 days. When even though it was only supposed to be 2 days, and then Michael Jordan bangs down the hotel room and finds a naked Carmen Electra. I mean, that whole story was just insane, and all the Dennis Rodman stuff. That was another really big highlight for me because we already kind of knew it, but just kind of watch it again. That epic
Yeah,
montage was awesome to watch too with him in Vegas, like I said. Um, yeah, that was another really entertaining and quality part. And also, he when they did the Indian run there at the end, and he was still beating everybody, even though he was supposedly out of shape. That's ridiculous. That you can just party all night in Vegas and then come back and be in better shape than all like the guys that have been working hard. That's nuts. I mean, Rodman was a really good player, and I think the documentary did a really good job at kind of showing his crazy side, but also how good a basketball player he was.
I think the fact that Phil Jackson was able to manage all three of those egos on the same team at once is just,
Yeah,
shows his greatness. That's a hard job to do. We've seen it fail before with Kobe and Shaq later in their teaming up, but yeah, that's hard to manage all those egos. So props to him.
yeah,
yeah,
for sure. Do we want to jump into our least favorite moments of the doc?
sure. Who wants to
All
go
right.
first?
All right, I'll start. Mine was definitely the sitting bull incident. Scottie Pippen taking himself out of the game in the final 2 seconds versus the Magic in the '94 playoffs. It really rubbed me the wrong way. I never pegged Scottie as a quitter before this, but I guess I learned the story of why many people call him the quitter. I think after Tony Kukoc was hitting all those game-winning shots earlier in the season, and you're a superstar, I think part of being a superstar is letting your team, letting your teammates have a chance to show themselves. Like Jordan gave his teammates multiple chances to prove themselves at like clutch times, like Paxson and guys like that, Grant. I just think that Scotty
Steve Kerr.
was a little bit more selfish than MJ, and that really rubbed me the wrong way.
When you jump into the '97 finals, when Michael Jordan kind of passed off the final shot to Steve Kerr, and even going back to the '93 finals when he gave it to Paxson, again, it kind of just shows how, as great of a player as Pippen was, that he wasn't as great of a leader, or I guess in a way, I mean, I know we'll probably talk about a little bit later how MJ was sometimes a tough teammate to be with. I think overall he was a better teammate and a much better leader than Pippen. You guys want to have the Scottie Pippen discussion right now? I think we all kind of have some hot takes on Scottie Pippen, but we can do that now
Yeah,
or we can save it for later.
we can jump into that right now if you'd like. Scottie Pippen. I guess I'll start really quick because I know Drew's got a lot to say about him. But Scottie Pippen, he's a great player, and I don't know. I felt like the documentary just kind of portrayed him as just kind of a baby. He seemed like there was a lot of different moments of drama with him, whereas Jordan, I know they kept talking about him being a bad teammate and cussing out his teammate and stuff, but it almost even like the images you saw or like the verbal altercation you saw, they were all just like it seemed like he was just talking trash, which it just didn't seem like as big of a deal, I guess, as like the things that Pippen would do where he's like, I'm quitting on my team or I'm not gonna show up because I'm not getting paid enough. Like I'm all about the hustle, but you can't be a little whiny baby about it too. It kind of drove me crazy, and I think it's why I don't really like Scottie Pippen. I mean, I knew about this stuff before that. I was hoping they would kind of go over it, but I'm just not. I'm not really a big fan of his. I think he was just not that kind of leader as you guys were saying.
Yeah. I'm obviously I was biased headed into this documentary because Scottie Pippen's probably my least favorite NBA player of all time, and maybe one of my least favorite athletes of all time. I don't like him that much. And so headed into this documentary, it started to kind of change my opinion about him a little bit because I really realized that he was a really good player. I mean, one of the best defenders ever in the league, was an elite offensive option, was the perfect Robin to Jordan's Batman. He was a really good player.
Yeah, for sure.
With that being said, though, he wasn't a good leader. He wasn't a good teammate. He was a whiner. He was kind of a wuss. I know they tried to kind of change the narrative there in the last episode, how he like stayed out there on the bad back with the Jazz. But you look at the incident like Ryan already talked about, the Sitting Bull incident where he pouted on the bench with Bill Cartwright screaming in his ear because Kukoc had to take the game-winning shot. And then you also look at the before the 97-98 season when he didn't come to he didn't have the surgery because he wanted to have a good summer, is what he said. Just the constant contract problems that he had. And I think he definitely valued winning a lot, but I think his money and his individual statistics and accolades were much more important to him. And I think he kind of had to knock him on that because I think in today's NBA, he'd be the equivalent of like a James Harden type of player, a guy that can really get it done in the regular season, but can't really lead his team to over the top. I think that's kind of where Scottie Pippen would be had he not had
I
Jordan.
agree with you.
And we'll talk a little bit. I do have some additional thoughts on his contract problems with Kraus and Reinsdorf, but I do believe we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So I'll save my thoughts on that for a little bit later. But Ryan, do you have any other Scottie Pippen opinions you want to add?
I agree with all that. In relation to the whining, you can kind of see it in the way MJ controls the documentary, the docu series. Because if he doesn't like you, he's going to drag you through the mud in this 10-part series. And you saw that with Horace Grant and Isaiah Thomas. And I think I don't know. I mean, holding grudges from 20 years, 25 years later, it just shows really how competitive he is and how kind of petty he can get at the same time. So Jordan wasn't free from his whining incidents as well. I mean, if he didn't like you, he's going to hold a grudge against you, and
Yeah,
he's going to try to put you in a bad limelight. So
I think the
yeah,
difference between the two of them is that Jordan would use stuff like that to his advantage and kind of uses as motivation or whatever. Maybe not with maybe a little bit with his teammates, more with his opponents. If he didn't like you, he was gonna show you that he didn't like you by just absolutely dominating you and making you question if you're even good at basketball. But Pippen, I feel like he didn't drag him through the mud. I feel like they're not really friends, but he doesn't. I think he respects Pippen a little bit, at least. Still,
yeah. He
I
definitely
think
respects him.
so long.
yeah, it's
They're
hard to be
teammates for
friends
so
with Michael
long.
Jordan. I don't know how
Yeah,
you're friends with that guy.
yeah. He's like I said, he's definitely a tough person to be around. But you could kind of tell because the migraine game too with against the Pistons in the was that the 1990 conference finals in Game Seven, where Pippen had the migraine and like he couldn't play at all. You could tell there was a couple times where Jordan wanted to say basically call Pippen a wuss, how he didn't want it
Right,
enough, but he didn't say it because I think they asked him about it. He just was kind of like, I guess he had a migraine, and you could tell that he wanted to say more, which is kind of funny. Um,
right.
but yeah, I think that's just kind of. And Pippen also can add one more thing. He's also just very arrogant, and he just whenever he talks, I just think he thinks he's better than everybody. And I just don't. just rubs me the wrong way, and I don't like that. And like I said, I don't think he would have been a champ. I don't think he would have been a champion without uh, Jordan and the Bulls. I think
No doubt.
and I think even if Scottie wasn't there, I think the Bulls wouldn't have won 6 championships, but I still think they would have won quite a few because he was a good player, but he just wasn't a great teammate and off the court personality, I guess.
Yeah, that's some well said from you, Drew. Should we move on to another topic now?
Sure. Does anyone else have any least favorite moments from the entire docu series as a whole, or you want to jump into the favorite teammates or opponents aspect of
I
our pod?
just super fast. I guess the dream team stuff. It was all right. I wouldn't say it was a least favorite moment. I was a little bit bored during that section. I just didn't really think it was that. I like know a lot about the dream team, so I guess that's kind of on me more than other people. Maybe other people enjoyed it more seeing him with all the other greats, but I thought it was a little bit boring and it was kind of dragged out. So that episode was probably one of my least favorite. That was episode 3 or 4, maybe.
I think it was episode 5, and I
I
completely agree with you, Chris. I'm glad you mentioned that because I was going to forget to bring that up. But yeah, the Dream Team stuff, for whatever reason, it just never has interested me that much. I think the Dream Team is very important to basketball. I don't think it'd be the international game it is today without the Dream Team. But that stuff to have like an entire episode, it just kind of sounds like, and part of it's probably me being bitter that Isaiah Thomas didn't make the team even though he deserved to. Um, but it's like they blew out every team, and I just whenever it
right.
gets brought up, I feel like they're just talking about how great they are for like 45 minutes, and I'm like, okay, this is getting a little bit old. I don't really need to hear this the whole time. The Monte Carlo practice footage with
It was
Michael
cool.
Jordan saying this isn't the 90 or this is the 90s now, Magic, and Magic going, what does that mean? And then Jordan just taking over. That was fun. But the rest of the stuff, the Tony Kukoc stuff, I also liked. The rest of the Dream Team stuff, I was kind of like, I'm kind of done with this. It was still a good episode, but in comparison to the rest of the docu series, it wasn't that great.
Right. I agree with that. Well, why don't we jump into some of just really
Wait, does
quickly?
Ryan? Do you have any thoughts on the Dream
Oh,
Team? Did
I'm
you
done.
like that, or what is your?
Again, I think you got to remember that Jordan's trying to justify that he's the best of all time. He's competing with LeBron right now, so he had to throw that in there just
Yeah,
to remind everybody. And yeah, I'm a little PO'd that Isaiah Thomas was left off, so I didn't really like that segment as well.
yeah,
Right.
and actually, that also brought up one more thing that I wanted to say real quick. I didn't like how they just glossed over some teams, like the 94 95 Magic. Like if you went into this docu series with like out any prior knowledge to 90s basketball or the specifically the 90s Magic teams, you would have thought that like Horace Grant and Nick Anderson were like the greatest players of all time because they like I think they showed like one Shaq dunk, maybe mentioned Shaq's name like once, and then Penny Hardaway I think got maybe like one or two mentions. That specifically kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I was like, the Magic were one of the best teams in the 90s, and they didn't even talk about him. And I mean, Penny Hardaway was all NBA first team, I think his second year in the league that year. And Shaq was on the NBA 50 list just a few seasons later. And to barely even mention them, I was like, that's kind of weak. Same thing with the
Hmm.
Supersonics. They only talked about Gary Payton. Sean Kemp got like zero recognition. Even the Blazers. I mean, that series was the 91 series was a 6 game series. The way they kind of showed the footage, you would have thought it was a sweep. Just
Right.
kind of stuff like that. It was just kind of, I feel like they could have gave a little bit more recognition to some of the teams that Jordan dethroned.
Yeah, 100% agree, Drew. A name that I kind of felt like got washed away, and that was like Clyde Drexler. He's one of the greatest players of the '90s, and I feel like, and he's one of my favorite players of all time. Actually, I really like him. I think he was extremely talented and probably a top 20 player in NBA history at least. And I think that I really think they kind of glossed over him.
Yeah, he disrespected him a lot. I don't know if he's a
Right.
top 20 player of all time, but
Yeah, that's a little
It
hot
might be a
take.
little high.
yeah, he's definitely one of the best players of the 90s. And even there in the late 80s. I mean, a lot of people forget the Pistons or the Blazers are the team they beat in the second half of their back-to-back championships there in 1990. Um, but yeah, I mean, he definitely was like, how dare you compare me to Clyde Drexler? And then he just went out there and dominated. But,
Right.
yeah, that rubbed me the wrong way though.
Definitely. Why don't we jump into our favorite teammates and opponents of them? Ryan, why don't you start us off?
Ooh, favorite teammate. I was gonna say Horace Grant, but they had that huge falling out, so that's no longer an option. Honestly, I'm gonna say Dennis Rodman. You could say whatever you want about Dennis off the court, but when he was on the court, he was all business and he did his job and he didn't say anything. And that I gotta have mad respect for Dennis Rodman for what he did at what age 35 and age 36. I mean, he was still leading the league in rebounds, and then he would go out and party all night. But he just did his job. There was no drama, and he gave MJ exactly what they needed to win their last three. So Dennis Rodman was my favorite.
Chris, but he was probably my favorite too. But just to be different, I'll probably say Steve Kerr. That stuff about his past there in the second to last episode, I already kind of mentioned it. I had no idea about the assassination of his father. He also kind of had a funny line in there when he said, no colleges were looking at me, just like no girls were looking at me in high school. That made me laugh. I thought that was pretty funny. Um, and yeah, I mean, I'm definitely biased because I think Steve Kerr's a really good coach, but that whole story about Steve Kerr, I really found fascinating. And then the stuff that he said at the rally about he said, Mike, I got it, Mike, in regards to his game winning shot there in the '97 finals. I thought that was really funny, and that whole segment and that Steve Kerr as the teammate, I really enjoyed, and that was the Rodman was probably number one, but that was a close second for me.
And yeah, Kerr was going to be my favorite as well. I
Oh,
really
I'm
like
sorry.
him in general. I just felt like I felt like he was just really interesting. I really liked his any interview he was in. It just felt like he brought a lot to the table, and a lot of interesting stories, such as when him and MJ got into a fight, and he said that kind of brought them closer together because he wasn't like willing to back down from MJ. I don't know. Again, I'm biased as well because I really like Steve Kerr now, and I think he's awesome. But anytime he's in an interview or anything, it's going to be a good time. You're going to be interested. So that's
Yeah,
that's my
I completely forgot about the fight. I'm glad you mentioned that because that fight was entertaining to listen to, and yeah,
absolutely.
I definitely got a lot more respect for Steve Kerr after hearing I mean, it sounds like he got pretty beat up by MJ, but at least he defended himself, and not a lot of guys did that against MJ's berating. Just ask Scott Burrell.
Right. Yeah, it was a pansy. All right.
Okay. So we kind of talked about the opponents before. What was like your favorite opponent that MJ had to face, or maybe like the team that got the most screwed that you thought would like definitely would have won a championship had it not been for Jordan? There's a ton of teams, but what was like your top team or top opponent?
I really liked the. I'll start it off with Reggie Miller and the Pacers. I really liked. I really liked that team. I thought they were a lot of fun to watch. They had a lot of talent on that team. Miller was leading the squad, but they had a lot of role players around them. And what's his face right now? And Jalen Rose was on the team as well, and he's a beast. So, Reggie Miller, I really liked him because he had a cool confidence to him. You know, he believed that he could beat MJ, and he almost, frankly, did. Played really well in that series, and I
Yeah,
like that.
he didn't play great in Game 7, but yeah, he played
No,
most of the
yeah,
series.
but he hit the big shot too. To send it to Game 7. I
Yeah.
thought that was, and I don't know. I really like him as a player. He's one of my favorite players of the '90s, early 2000s. Interesting player for sure.
Reggie Miller's one of my. I don't know if you guys know this, but Reggie Miller is probably one of my favorite players of all time. So that Pacers stuff I really enjoyed. I will say though, I feel like they kind of missed their opportunity because when MJ was gone those 2 years, they lost to the Knicks and the Magic. I think in the
Right.
conference finals both times. And they eventually made the finals there. I think in '99 or no 2000 they made the finals finally. But they lost to the Lakers. So I will say they kind of missed their mark a little bit. But I think for me, actually, Ryan, I'll have you go first because I'm kind of decided between two teams. So if you say one of my teams, I'll say the other one. So Ryan, what was your team?
This is really tough. I really like the Suns, 92, 93 Suns. I really like the 95, 96 Supersonics, but I'm going to go with the Jazz, both 97 and 98 finals. Just Stockton and Malone, they're both iconic and probably two greatest players to not win a championship, arguably. You want to go back and look at, they were so close. I know Jordan said that the Pacers give him the most problems, but like when I went back and actually sat down and looked at the series more than just the box score, and like watch some of the games. I really, to me, I think the Jazz were the team that play Jordan the toughest. And that missed free throw that Karl Malone had in Game 1 of the Finals, I think if he makes that, and they take one game in Chicago and they go on to win two in Utah, I think we're talking about a different NBA champion that year. So I think for me, it was the Jazz with Stockton Malone.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because that was one of my teams. That was one of the teams I was deciding between. Because John Stockton, another player that's probably one of my favorite players of all time, and I think so. Those are two really good teams. I got to give a shout out to the Magic. They're not my team, but I mean, because they got swept by the Bulls there in 95, 96, the following year, Shaq left and there was some other stuff going on, but they got blown up. So I think that was a really talented team as well. But I think my team has to be that Charles Barkley Suns team in 92, 93. I mean, Barkley was an absolute beast that series. I think he averaged over 30 points a game. I think he was averaging double digit rebounds too. It was just MJ was averaging like 40 a game, and if it wasn't for, I mean, they're kind of mini choke there in the end of that game six that resulted in Paxson making that shot. I mean, I think they maybe would have even won a game seven because MJ, that was his first retirement. He was kind of falling apart there, and I think that was definitely one of my favorite teams. I have a Charles Barkley Suns jersey in my room, but I also think they got really screwed because I think they could have won. They easily could have won that series and moved on and won a championship, and we'd remember them and we'd remember Barkley a lot differently. But yeah,
Right.
also Ryan, you mentioned that the Sonics too, the Kemp and Payton Sonics, another favorite team of mine, and the Knicks. We got to mention the Knicks too. They I think they also kind of fall in that Pacers category of um, they made it to the finals there when Jordan was retired, but then lost to the Rockets, and they did have a lot of opportunities to win a championship in the '90s, but with Ewing, Starks, then later on with the Larry Johnson, Latrell Sprewell, those kind of Knicks, they were really good, and I think they definitely missed their opportunity there. But they're another kind of favorite team of mine as well, and Charles Oakley too. Can't forget Charles Oakley.
Yeah, I like that for sure. Should we jump into our least favorite teammates and opponents?
Sure. There wasn't. Oh, you guys start this off because there really wasn't. I don't really know if I had a least favorite opponent. My least favorite teammate was definitely Scottie Pippen.
Yep,
Uh,
me too. That's I'm
Yeah,
gonna
we
we
say
can
already,
all
that.
agree on that.
We don't need to go over
we
that
already kind of
then.
talked about that, and we'll probably talk about it a little bit again, little bit again later. But I don't know. Did you guys have any other ones that you were kind of like,
Um,
screw this
I guess
guy
I
or
can
screw
jump
this
into
team?
one. I can jump into one that I didn't really like because I think he's a little bit of an overrated player. I think it's Gary Payton for me. He's all right. He's really like I mean he's really good, obviously, but I think he's a little bit overrated, and I think it's overblown that he could like stop Jordan. I really don't think he could, and I think maybe he's a little bit better, but I don't know. I'm not really that big of a fan of his, so I guess that's the one that kind of sticks out for me.
I
All right.
mean, I like Gary Payton. I think he's a really good point guard. I know Ryan's probably about to go off on you right here, Chris, but um, I, I, th- I do think because Jordan kind of laughed and he had that really savage moment where he was just kind of like, I didn't have any problems with the glove, and he almost hinted that he basically threw games. Was that game four and game five? Just so he could win it on Father's Day to kind of honor his father there in the '96 finals. He kind of hinted at that, which that just takes a lot of balls. I mean, we saw with a few years ago with the Cavs coming back on the Warriors from the 3-1 deficit. I mean, you just give away two games in the finals, and I don't know if he was lying about that. Maybe he did really have problems about the glove, but it does kind of make sense that you want to win on a Father's Day for his father. But I still think Gary Payton was a really good player. So I kind of see where you're coming from, Chris, but I also I think he was a good player.
Yeah, no, he's a good player. I just don't think I don't know. He just doesn't. When I think of all time greats, I don't. He's just a name that just kind of escapes, I guess. So I maybe he's even a little bit underrated in terms of what I like remember him doing. But I don't know. I just don't really see him up there with guys like Stockton and Magic and them. I don't think he's in that tier or even really that close to it.
He's also the only guard to win a Defensive Player of the Year award too. So
Yeah, no, he was a very good defender. I just don't think he could stop NJ. And he only averaged 16 a game, like I mean, in his career, which is still very good. And you have to factor in the end of his career, which he kind of fell off and averaged like 3 points a game. But even in his peak, he was only averaging like 20. I mean, 20 and 7 is good, but it's not like absurd. Yeah, that makes sense. I guess
you gotta remember
that's
those '90s NBA. All right, Ryan, you take it away. I can see you're just chomping at the bit here. You
Well,
got to say something.
why I don't understand why you bring up someone's last season when they're in their late 30s. What does that have any bearing on? Why don't we just go and bring up the last season from everybody in the NBA and say, "Oh man, they suck. They fell off. They're 38
Well, no,
years old."
I was giving him more credit because I said his averages of 16 points a game are a little bit lower than they probably should be because he had a couple bad seasons at the end of his career, which it was probably closer to like 18 or 19 a game for his career when he was actually in his prime. But I just never really think his career high like average points per game was only 24, and I mean he was a good passer for sure and a good defender, but I don't know, I just don't see him in the upper echelon of
Okay,
point
well,
guard.
first of all, box scores don't do players justice. You have to go beyond that. If you looked on his impact
That's
on the
fair.
game and what the Supersonics were trying to do, which was basically pressure you in the half court defense, get out in the offense, and run. I think the way that they kind of changed the, I mean, you can even go back to them and say they started, changing the game of basketball in terms of running the floor. I mean, obviously the Showtime Lakers probably patented that, but the Supersonics were the team to bring it into the '90s with George Karl. I think his impact on the game, as well as the '90s, as well as his emphasis on defense. I don't know. I don't know what your beef with him is, though.
I don't have any beef. It was just not he's not my favorite. I wanted to bring a name to the table and see if anyone had wanted to talk about it. I don't
Are
hate
you? What do you think
not
about
one of
his
my
trash?
favorites.
What do you think about his trash talking? Do you not like that?
I mean, it's fine, but I just didn't really think. I don't think he can stop Jordan, and it was. I thought it was just kind of funny. He just kind of shrugged. It seemed like Jordan just kind of like shrugged him off, like he just wasn't like. He just felt like he was above him, and I mean, I thought that was kind of funny. So I mean,
Well, first off, nobody can
trash
stop.
talk.
Nobody can stop MJ. Just to get that out there, because he's the greatest player of all time. Second of all, I
Very
don't know
true.
if you remember the preseason moment Gary Payton had with Michael Jordan in his rookie season where he called him out, and then Jordan would go on to the next game to like drop 38 on him. I don't know if you remember that, but that was pretty funny. It just shows you that Gary Payton didn't back down for anyone, and that's part of the reason why I really respect him.
I mean, that's fair, man. I'm not hating on him. I just wanted to bring the name to the table, and I just didn't think he was as up to par as some of the other teams like splash player, like best players. I guess if that makes sense.
All right, that was a good Gary Payton talk there. I like it. I like it. Does anybody else have any least favorite teammates or opponents from the doc? Um,
Okay,
I don't
well,
have
hot
anybody.
take. I didn't think the Pacers were all that good, to be honest. I thought they were kind of overrated. Outside of Reggie Miller and Rick Smits, I didn't see that much in that team.
I mean, they had aging Chris Mullin with his shaved head. That was kind of weird to see. They had Mark Jackson, who was a good point guard.
Mark Jackson was an
Um,
excellent point guard. Yeah, great distributor, but
yeah, yeah. I would say that they were probably like the fourth best team that Jordan maybe faced there. I think behind the Pistons. Actually, maybe not. Now I'm listening. Probably they're like fifth or sixth in my opinion. I think they're a good team, and I mean even if Jordan says that they're like a really tough one of his, I think they said only behind the Pistons in terms of his competition he had to face in the East. I mean I think you gotta kind of respect that.
no, I definitely respect that. But when we did that article covering you did the East teams that were the best that faced Jordan, I did the West. I came away with that the West was just a little bit better during the East in the '90s. That was just my opinion. Not like a
Yeah,
terribly difference like there is now with the West and the East, but I think that back then the West was a little bit more talented.
yeah, it was definitely different styles of basketball. Every '90s East team basically just was like the bad boys. Even the Bulls to a certain extent, and then the West was much more. It kind of resembled a little bit how it was today, especially with those Suns teams, the Jazz teams, like we already talked about. Even the Blazers to a certain extent. But um,
That's fair.
so, any other kind of big takeaways you want to take from the doc before we jump into the some questions here that I want to
No,
pose to all you guys?
I think I'm ready for that.
All right. So the first kind of question here is a lot of people are kind of saying this on social media and on ESPN and different channels like that is was the doc a little bit too Michael Jordan slash Bulls biased or centered? I mean, I already kind of talked about how they kind of brushed past a lot of his like better opponents and like Shaq and Penny. Um, did you guys feel that maybe it was a little bit too biased or centered, or what did you guys think?
Well, for the purpose he was trying to serve with it, I'm going to say no because in my opinion, I think the fact that he released it at this time, he was just kind of trying to give himself an extension as the title of his GOAT. I don't think he has to justify. I think he's the greatest of all time, but I think all this, LeBron's accomplishments in the past decade kind of made the conversation a little bit closer, and you got a lot of people saying that LeBron's the GOAT now. So I think for its purpose, trying to serve as a reminder, I think it wasn't that biased.
See, and I do think I think he had a lot of input on how the documentary kind of went because I just felt like there was a lot of things that they didn't dive into. I'm sure we're gonna get into that later with some of the more negative things about him. But I felt like I felt like it was a little bit biased personally. Not insanely like as such as other people. People are going off about it on Twitter, but I definitely think there was a little MJ, at least MJ bias there for sure. But it was an MJ documentary, so
Yeah,
I mean, respect.
I think we kind of got to remember that. But yeah, I kind of agree with you too, Chris. I definitely think it was a little bit biased towards the Bulls and the Jordan. The big reason for that was, like I already mentioned, was the teams. I feel like there's a lot of teams they just kind of brushed past that I think
Right.
were good competition against Jordan, and also that they didn't even really bring up anything about. I mean, they of course they had the whole thing about Jordan's gambling, but they could have got a little bit farther in depth in that. The Michael Jordan Wizard stuff was like not even mentioned. Like if you
Yeah,
again,
I wanted to hear about
if
that.
you would have watched this documentary, and I get it's called The Last Dance, so you're not really talking about the Wizards, but if you would have watched this doc, you would have thought, okay, that's Jordan's shot in Game Six against the Jazz. That was his last moment. He never played a game of basketball ever again in his life. But there was the whole kind of episode with the Wizards. Um, yeah, and I think it was obvious that MJ was portrayed to be the hero, and even looking at the Pippen stuff, Pippen, and I think he's actually come out and said he doesn't like the way he was portrayed. I think that's a report out there right now, and I kind of understand that because Pippen was very much kind of, I think for somewhat for good reason, was labeled as like a whiner and a crybaby, and I think there could have been a little bit more good play, good things of Pippen there. So I think it
Right.
definitely was biased towards MJ a little bit, at least.
And
And also just the Jerry Krause stuff. He was painted as the villain, Jerry Reinsdorf. And we'll talk about that, I think, the next question here. But uh, it would have been really nice to see Jerry Krause's perspective on things. And I also heard that they didn't even ask any of his family members, Jerry Krause's, to like participate in this doc. And I think that would have been really nice to hear at least some point of something from his point of view, because it was very, mainly the first two episodes was just constantly just rubbing it in Jerry Krause's face, and it was like, can we just calm down a little bit? But yeah.
yeah, it's
Um,
good points there, Drew, for sure. I definitely I further agree with what you're saying. Good stuff.
thank you, Chris.
You're very
Um,
welcome.
so the next question I kind of already hinted at was, can you guys understand why the Bulls, the organization, wanted to break it up there? Slash, kind of understand the management side of things, or were Krause and Reinsdorf, were they just idiots and they just didn't know what they were doing? Um, yeah, what were your thoughts on that? Because that's another kind of hot topic that's going around social media. Is there's It seems like most people are on Kraus and Reinsdorf, as they were kind of the villains, but there's also some people that kind of understand where they're coming from. Where do you guys stand?
I'll start this one off because I Kraus, he was. You can say what you want about his character and personality. He was portrayed yet, like Drew said, as the villain of the entire doc, pretty much. But you can't deny the fact that he built an absolute dynasty of a team. Like he built a great roster. His draft picks, they were fantastic. He made great trades, and I mean, he got MJ too. So he saw that at the third overall pick, and that was I mean, obviously
Wait, no,
best pick of.
he didn't draft MJ.
Oh, he didn't. Never mind. My
Yeah,
bad. Apologies. Anyway, but regardless of that, he built the team, the way he wanted, and then I feel like he honestly had the right to break it up at the point. Everyone was starting to get a little older. You can make the argument they could have made another run at 7, but I don't know how that would have went. And they did such a good job building the roster again. I feel like he was like, oh well, I can do it again. It'll be no problem. I did it like this, and we won 6 championships, so I could do it again. And so I don't really think he was that big of an idiot, but hindsight's 2020. Now he doesn't look great, but that's kind of my opinion on it.
yeah, I kind of agree with that. I do definitely see where he's coming from, where they're coming from here, because they were getting older, and like you said, he already kind of did it himself. Built the Bulls into a really good team already. He probably thought, hey, I can do it again. But I do think that they should have let him go for 7. I think that's just dumb. Because I heard something the other day. Somebody said something about how he was so worried that they would suck by like the early 2000s, and that's why they had to break it up right away. Well, they broke it up right away, and they sucked by the early 2000s still. So like, why not win
Right.
another? why not win another seventh championship? Why not make it a four-peat? And just kind of keep winning, because I do think the Bulls had the right to kind of defend their crown until they lost it. And then I think Jordan even said it. Once we lose, then okay, let's break it up. But yeah, and I understand why, but I don't know. I think they definitely should have. They should have at least given him a shot to kind of fight for seven.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure.
It
You
Ryan,
got
was
what's your take
Yeah,
on it?
yeah, so it was interesting to see both of their perspectives. From Jordan's perspective, it's the players going out there and winning all these championships, but we saw multiple times Kraus would emphasize that it's an organization as a whole that's going out there and winning the championships. That's one of the reasons why I respected Jerry Krause. He was confident in his ability, but he
right.
also gave credit where credit was due to everybody. This isn't just one person doing everything. There's so much that goes involved, and I really respect him that he placed an emphasis on the whole team thing. And I think, I don't know, they were just two people. Jordan and Kraus were just two confident people that were out to prove something. And I think Kraus, like you guys mentioned, that he wanted to go out there and prove that he could do it all again. So that's maybe why he tore it down. But I think it would be interesting to see if Jordan and Pippen were in today's NBA with all the whining that was going on about contracts and being mispaid. Would they leave in free agency? Would they go somewhere else to someone that's maybe paying them higher? Because with all the whining that went on, they stayed in Chicago. They whatever differences they had with the contract situation, they worked it out. But it'd be interesting to see if what will go on with in today's NBA with all that contract stuff.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the contract there, because I wanted to mention that real quick. The Pippen and the contract stuff, like I I get it. Like you want to renegotiate, but like when you got Reinsdorf just telling you don't sign this contract, you're getting screwed, and you still sign it anyway, then you can't cry 2 years later when you're not getting paid what you deserve, honestly. And I get it. Like Reinsdorf and Kraus could have been nice guys and renegotiated the deal so he gets a fair wage, but at the same time, it's like you signed a contract. This is what you do. Maybe if you feel like you deserve more money, then maybe you should do a better job at uh, negotiating your contract at the time before you sign it. And I mean that's kind of a common theme now with all sports. I mean, look at Darius Slay there with the Lions just last year when he was crying about how he wasn't getting paid enough money. I just feel like you sign the contract and you should play it out. And you don't see. I don't like owners that much. I don't like GMs that much. I think they're kind of all slime bags a little bit. But
That's putting it lightly.
yeah. But like if an owner went to a player, say for example Timofey Mozgov, who gets paid like $25 million to suck, right, a couple of years ago, say an owner goes to him and says, "Hey, let's renegotiate your deal so you're not getting paid this much money." The players' union would freak out. Everybody would lose their minds, and that's really what the players are asking the owners to do. Vice versa, like the player feels like he deserves more money, and they renegotiate. So the owners, they're just looked as the bad guy regardless, and I don't agree with that. And Pippen, I mean he had a really tough upbringing, and he traded more money for stability, and I feel like you just kind of have to live with that, and you can't like Reinsdorf said, you can't come back later and cry about it 2 years later when you signed the contract. And I feel like he has kind of a duty to kind of play that contract out, and that's just my opinion. But again, it's not like he's making $20 a year and living on the streets. He's making like almost $2 million, and I get like the whole, well, the team's making more money and blah blah blah, but still, like, just calm down, Scottie Pippen, my guy.
Yeah, I'd like to touch on that a little bit. You were talking about some of the NFL players. You could look at Lev Bell a few years ago. You could look at Melvin Gordon. You can look at Darius Slay. Holding out for contracts. I think it is a little bit different because these players they're looking for money and they're quickly they're closer to free agency than Pippen was. He signed a really long term deal. He was just in the final stages of that. Whereas they were their rookie deals and their previous contracts were about to be up and they're looking to make as much money as they can. Versus him just he signed well I don't remember what the contract was, but it was all like 3 million, 2 or 3 million a year, whatever for like
Yeah,
7 years. I feel like I agree. You kind of have to play it out, but I don't agree to the point where it's a little bit different than the NFL, where their players are coming off their rookie deals and trying to you know get paid because they don't get that second contract like Pippen would have got. Or he did get. He got another
yeah.
contract.
It's also not guaranteed in the NFL too. They don't get guaranteed
Right.
money, so it is a little different. I agree, but that
Right.
was just the first example that kind of popped in my head,
Yeah. Fair
because
enough.
you kind of see this in all sports. I just feel like you sign a contract and you got to play it. And unless the players' union's okay with the owners coming back to the players that are getting paid an exorbitant amount of money and suck, and they can renegotiate those deals, then I don't really feel like why the players feel like they got to cry all the time when they feel like, because I honestly, I mean, you can see guys that get paid like 25 million a year and they're still crying about how they're underpaid. It's like, come on, like what are we doing here?
Yeah, it's
Anyway,
crazy. It's well, real quick. It's crazy to think that like what was Jordan making around $3 million now, close to 5 million maybe. And you go now and you look at what $5 million can get you. It can get you someone like Marco Bellinelli. It's just, I mean, it really tells you the story of how far the NBA's come in terms of paying their players. While there's still problems present with contracts, I think we've come a long way towards giving these players what they deserve.
yeah, and I think kind of to kind of put a bow on top of the Kraus conversation is I think they put it really nicely in the doc. They said how he deserved more credit than he got, but he wanted more credit than he deserved, and that's kind of why he had so many issues. And also, I mean, real quick to kind of give Kraus some more credit, he took a lot of berating from Jordan, kind of making fun of his weight, making fun of his height, Pippen swearing him and cussing him out on the bus in front of the whole team. And
Right.
Kraus just still is on the bus, like he doesn't even care. I mean, you got to give him props for that.
Yeah, definitely. Do give him some definitely some mad props for that. Do we
Yeah.
want to jump into the do we want to jump into the next question?
Sure. So we already kind of talked about this. This will be kind of quick. Were there any other additional players, executives, coaches, etc., that you would have wanted to see, family members, maybe that you wanted to see interviewed, or you wanted to see kind of more of if they were featured in the doc? For me, it's probably Jerry Krause. I already kind of said
Yep, me too.
he unfortunately passed away, but even maybe just a representative of his family or something, just so we kind of can get more of his perspective, because that kind of goes back to it was very MJ centered and biased, and it would have been nice to kind of see things from both perspectives, I guess.
Yeah, that's definitely. I definitely agree with that. Obviously, there's no way for them to do it unless they were doing the documentary before he passed away, which did not happen. So that would have been the one for me. But I don't have anything else after that.
Yeah,
Ryan, do
no,
you have any?
Jared Krause was definitely mine. I wonder if Jordan's party didn't want one of the family members to come on there and say something that would hurt his legacy, so maybe that's why they didn't ask him, or maybe he's still holding that grudge. Who knows?
Yeah.
Right.
Um, I was listening to something. I already mentioned this, but I guess they didn't even reach out to anyone in Krause's family, which I thought was kind of weird, and I think it does kind of hurt the legitimacy of this doc in a way, just because you don't even get the other perspective of it.
Right.
Um,
I agree with that.
I was also surprised too that Carl Malone and then Shaq and Penny and even Sean Kemp, they didn't get any interviews either. But and Charles Barkley too, Dream Team Charles Barkley. He was like the best player that year, and during those Olympics, and he got zero really zero recognition during that Dream Team part. But we'll kind of jump into the next question here. Do you believe any of those conspiracies around Jordan's first retirement? Was it due to his gambling problems? And the media stuff about his dad, and like how his dad's death was like a direct result of his gambling. I mean, that was messed up. But anyway, do you kind of believe those conspiracies around his first retirement, or do you think he just needed a break?
I do. I actually definitely believe that. I don't
Believe what?
really.
I asked you two questions. What do you believe?
Oh, my bad. I believe. I actually do believe that he. I think his first retirement was strictly because of his gambling problems. I don't know if it was the fact that I don't think it was directly related to his dad's death, but I definitely believe that he had a major gambling problem that was not shown at all in the documentary, which people that just know about the documentary, like they wouldn't even really believe that. They'd be like, wow, that's crazy that they would even talk about that at all. But I definitely think they're directly related, and I don't really care what anybody says about it. I it really doesn't matter to me. I think it's directly related. I
So
don't
did
see
David Stern tell him to sit out for 2 years? That's what happened. He said, "Hey, Mike, you got a gambling problem. I need you to sit out for 2 years, buddy." Is that what went on?
Well, he probably didn't say that. He probably was like, "Hey, I need you to to step back from the game for a little bit, clear your mind, and figure this out, and then we can have you back or whatever." Why would you? Okay,
So
I
wait,
just
wait,
don't
wait, hold on.
think
In a league
championship.
that's trying to make money, they're going to take out
Yeah,
their most
it,
profitable player for 2 years. That just doesn't make sense to
David
me.
Stern was all about making money, and if you look at the stats, they lost like millions of dollars because Jordan retired, in like TV ratings and merchandise and all that stuff. So and David Stern was very big capitalist, and I sorry Chris, but I really don't agree with you on that one. I don't think for the NBA as a business, I don't think it just doesn't make any sense, especially from Stern's background. Why I don't understand why they would tell him to take a break. Maybe because it'd make a huge boom when he came back in '95, maybe, but I don't know. I don't agree with that.
See, I just don't get why does a player retire after three straight championships and he's the best player, like easily the best player in the world? Why is he randomly just sitting out for 2 years? That doesn't
Well,
make
they
any
showed
difference.
it. They showed it. I mean, he couldn't take the media anymore. They were just on him all the time. Stuff about the stuff with his dad. I mean, his dad died. His dad was his best friend. And then, of course, the media was coming after him because of his gambling issues and how it maybe resulted in his dad's death and all that stuff. And he just couldn't take it anymore. And he needed. And a big thing that they kind of said in the doc was about how he, with the basketball, whenever he played, he was reminded of his dad, and he just needed a break. And he always loved baseball, and he just kind of wanted to be one of the guys. And it was just kind of a way for him to deal with his dad's death. I think that those are all legitimate reasons for him wanting to retire and just take a break.
I don't know, man. I see. I just don't. I really don't agree with that. I mean, it's fine. Like, there's no way to really prove it or whatever. I can hear it out of anybody's mouth. Like, it doesn't really matter to me. It's not really gonna change my mind. I think that he had a gambling problem for sure, and I think that again, I don't want to insinuate that he caused his own dad's death because that's just horrendous, and there's no really way to prove that or anything. And it's not like it was like gang related or anything. So I do think there's some truth to that. I understand that they portrayed it as like how like everything was so overwhelming, but for as a great competitor as he was, I just don't see why he could have won 8, 9 finals had he stuck around. He could have won three. He could have easily won all three of those right after that.
Yeah, but
So
I think you're
I just don't get
forgetting
it.
how hard it is to be Michael Jordan and have for like 365 days the pressure is on. That like we saw how
Right.
great that pressure was. And I think the media kind of ruined the fun for him. You saw him. I mean, at the end of the '93 final, he was exhausted, man. I
Yeah,
mean, I can definitely
He
see
seemed
why he
exhausted
wanted to.
after every season, though.
No,
Me,
that's but like he was physically and
mentally.
mentally, yeah, mentally exhausted, and I just think the media drove him out of the game, and I can see why. After winning three in a row, he was the first to do it. I mean, I wouldn't have any motivation to either, to be honest, after all that was going on. And I think you watch too many movies to try and correlate his dad's death
Yeah,
with this gambling problem. I think you're watching
well,
too
no,
many
I
movies.
said I'm not trying to insinuate those two things were the same thing. I think the gambling may have just been independent, but I do believe he had a gambling problem that was not shown at all on the documentary, which I would think it would have been interesting, but I wasn't expecting it. So you can't really
uh,
knock him too
I
bad for
was.
it.
I mean, he definitely had
A gambling
a
problem.
gambling issue, and I was pretty surprised that they actually kind of. I mean, I definitely think they could have went more into that,
Yes.
but they. I was surprised that they actually talked about it at all. I mean, I was kind of worried that they were just if they didn't even talk about it at all, then for me this doc would have just lost all its legitimacy for me. So I was
Credibility. It wouldn't
impressed that
even
they
look
actually
bad.
talked about it. But
Yeah, that's fair.
I don't believe any of the conspiracies. I think he just like Ryan said. I think he just needed a break. I think he was just exhausted.
Yeah, there's two sides to every coin. That's what makes sports a lot of fun. Everybody gets their own. I believe a lot of the NBA conspiracy theories, and this is definitely one that I do believe as well. That his retirement was not just he was probably tired, but I just don't see the most competitive player of all time in any sport leaving after three straight championships and him being easily the best player in the world and then winning three more right after that too. I really believe if he'd have won 9 in a row, LeBron would have absolutely no like there would be no debate that he'd be like the goat of like the universe 9 in a row
I
with how
agree
good
with
he
that, but I disagree with the other points. So we're just gonna move on here. You mentioned it
I,
there, the competitive nature of Michael Jordan, um, and the ways he found motivation. There was a lot of crazy ways that he did. Like he didn't say hi to George Carl, or George Carl didn't say hi to him in a restaurant, and then he was like, "How dare you not say hi to me?" And then he made up the one thing about the one Bullets player that LeBradford.
LeBradford,
Um,
yeah,
yeah,
that was
and how
great.
he just made it up. Like he said, "Nice game," and he didn't even say "nice game." I mean, that was crazy. That was funny. Did you guys have any kind of thoughts about how he was really competitive with his teammates and all that stuff? And they even called him an a hole many times throughout the doc. But I didn't think the stuff was too bad. I mean, I think he just wanted to win, and he pushed his teammates and kind of got in their heads and wanted them to be as great as he was and as great as they could be. And I think that was kind of motivational, inspirational. But yeah, any thoughts on kind of those two things?
I've never seen anyone more competitive than Jordan. And after this, it just kind of reassured it. I mean, even when he was with his security guard, I forget the guy's name, but he was flipping the quarters, trying to get it closest in the wall. And oh my God, he was getting into that. It was just the littlest things. It was really cool to see just how his competitive nature goes into the littlest things. For me, that was
Yeah,
really
definitely.
interesting.
And his golf game too, and how he's like when he was pulling Scottie Pippen out of the gym to get on that or the tour bus and trying to
Oh, that
pull
was
him off to the
great.
golf course. That was pretty funny too.
He sat in
Chris,
the
any
driver's
thoughts on
seat.
that?
I really just think it was extremely interesting to just reassure, as Ryan said, how just competitive, crazy competitive he was. He was an alien basically at the time. Like there's no player in the NBA now that has more of the drive and motivation. Like no one's making up reasons to just either maybe not hate, but to fuel the fire, I guess, if that makes sense. And he was able to get to that next, like normally, he was just his normal competitive self, and then he could just find that next gear where he just take over any game, any series, and win it by himself with no help.
Yeah, um, it was really. I mean, it was great, and of course the Brian Russell stuff too. When Brian Russell disrespected him during while he was playing baseball, and then he comes back and just it's maybe the greatest shot of all time, most memorable shot of all time. I mean, that's pretty good. Now the
Did he
last
push
question we got
off?
here, but what'd you say?
Did he push
Oh, the
off?
push off. Uh,
I don't
I
think
don't
he
think
did.
so. They had that angle there in the dock, and maybe they purposely put it in there, but like it doesn't. If Reggie Miller's game winner wasn't a push off, that definitely wasn't a push off.
Yeah.
Um, so the final question here before we kind of jump into some rapid fire what ifs, which three-peat was more impressive, the first one or the second one?
Second one,
Second one.
I
easily.
agree. I agree. So
And we
that
don't
was
really
easy.
need to get into
That was
it.
easy.
Yeah,
I think that I mean, it was nice to see how it was two different Jordans. You had like the grizzled veteran craftsman, however you say that word, the of the second three-peat, and then you had like the athletic freak of the first three-peat. It was two different Jordans, but if you look at the
right.
competition they faced that second three-peat, it was definitely more impressive, and also just the way he could kind of turn his body from a baseball body, as he said, to a basketball body. It's definitely more impressive. Um, so the final segment here before we jump into our final thoughts is going to be a rapid fire here because we're running a little bit long here on time. It's called Through the Sliding Doors: The Best What Ifs of mainly the '90s. So I'll say the question and then we'll go. Ryan, you can go first and say what do you think would happen, and then Chris, you can finish it off, and then I'll jump in there at the end. So Ryan, what if the Bulls made a run at number 7? Do they win it or what happens?
Michael Jordan doesn't lose to the finals. I think the East was weak that year. They get back to the finals. They beat the Spurs. They take 7.
Me too.
I agree, and I think they probably lose to the Shaq and Kobe Lakers the following year, and then that's when they would get blown up, in my opinion. Ryan, what if Jordan didn't retire the first time?
I think Chris touched on it. I think he's going to continue to win championships, and we'd be talking about him in his own discussion, which he should be. But
Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I like I said earlier, I definitely agree. I think they would just kept winning. I don't think anything would have changed.
I'll
More
be, I'll be a
wins.
little I'll be a little I'll be a contrarian here. I think we still get that Knicks Rockets series in '94. I think the Knicks were kind of really knocking on the door. I think they could have bad boys them and beaten them, and the Rockets still would have won that finals. And I think that I think they would have won 4 in a row or 3 in a row. And then that '98 finals, I think the Bulls would have been worn out a little bit because Jordan never stopped. I think the Jazz maybe get a championship there. Um, Ryan, what if the Suns didn't choke there? I already kind of talked about it earlier, but
I know Game
'93
Seven.
finals.
Yeah, and I know Game 7 would be in Phoenix, but I like MJ to close out Game 7 and win that, no matter what.
Yeah, me too. Nothing's really going to change for me there. MJ wins.
I'm just the contrarian here. I think that the Suns maybe squeak out that game 7. It's at home. We already kind of talked about Jordan was worn out mentally and physically, and I think maybe Charles Barkley pulls it off and maybe comes off with that game 7. Um, All right,
Yeah.
98, Ryan, 98 finals. What if Malone doesn't lose the ball there that led to MJ's game winning shot? What do you think happens?
All right, I'm going contrary here. Doesn't lose the ball. I think Jazz take that first game. They take two at home. I think they go on to win the series, and we're talking about them as NBA champions.
Yeah, me too. It's kind of contrarian to the last. It's kind of contradictory to what me and Ryan just said 2 seconds ago that he just doesn't lose. But yeah, I think they would have lost as well.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Mainly because I think Pippen would have been hurt. I don't think he would have played Game 7. And Jordan, you could just see on his face there in that one shot they had where he was just like drinking his water. They're sitting on the bench, and he was done. And I
Yeah.
think if they go to Game 7, I don't think they win.
Right. Agreed.
Um,
For sure.
all right, and then the last one here. What if Peyton guards Jordan the whole series? This is a one that Chris and I were talking about a little bit before we started recording. Ryan, what do you think about it?
As much as I respect Gary Payton, I think he's an all-time great. As Chris mentioned, nobody can stop Jordan. I don't think it
No.
matters.
Yeah, I don't either. Think it would have been the exact same. Nothing
Yeah,
changed.
I think maybe they push it to 7 and the Bulls don't go up 3-0, but I think the Bulls still end up winning the series. I think the Sonics team was really good, but the Bulls were just a better team.
Yeah, that's definitely true. For sure.
So now the last thing we're going to talk about here is real quick again. So who was your favorite interviewee of the doc outside of obviously Michael Jordan? Ryan, you can go first.
Got to be Steve Kerr, as you guys said. Every interview, he brings a certain energy that kind of keeps you glued to your seat, kind of wondering what's going to happen next. And he's a really likable guy, so I got to say Steve Kerr.
And then I'll give out mine. It's Phil Jackson. We didn't really talk about him much in this episode, which is kind of it was kind of felt like as the documentary was. They didn't really seem to talk about him as much as I wish. 'Cause I really like Phil Jackson as a coach. I think he's awesome. I think he might be the best coach of all time. But I'm a big fan because he was very interesting hearing him talk about how at one point he said he did like acid in the
Yeah,
season.
I was gonna say
Yeah,
that was pretty funny.
that was one of my
I could,
favorite moments.
yeah,
I thought that was
I
funny.
could watch a whole doc on Phil Jackson. I mean, because
Me
even
too.
after this was done, you could go to about the talk about the Lakers years, and that was Shaq and Kobe, and then he comes back and wins 2 more championships with just Kobe. I mean, that'd be a really interesting doc. But I agree. I wish there was more Phil Jackson. And that's another real shout out to Jerry Krause. He hired Phil Jackson too, so you got to
Right,
give him
exactly. Great,
that.
great coach. Best coach of
My
all
favorite,
time.
yeah, my favorite interviewee was probably Reggie Miller. I just like the energy he brought there in the '98 conference finals. I really like him as a commentator now for TNT for
Me
some of the
too.
games. So I just really like the energy he brought. I also like Rodman, and I liked Isaiah Thomas too when he was interviewed. Speaking of Isaiah Thomas, last question: who was attacked the most during this documentary? I gotta say, it's got to be Isaiah Thomas. I mean, there was just a whole episode of Michael Jordan just crapping all over Isaiah Thomas there, and then they kind of did it again there for the Dream Team episode. And when he just gave him the iPad and was like, "I don't even want to watch this," he just made this up. I mean, that's complete disrespect. But what did you guys think?
Absolutely. Uh, I would say it had to be IT as well. I feel like there was just a mutual disrespect between those two, and I think IT is one of the as a top 3 point guard of all time. I think he definitely deserved some more props from Jordan. You can hate the guy, but you gotta respect him. You gotta respect him a little more. I feel like there was just such a lack of respect from Jordan, who seemed like most of his opponents, at least he respected. That was just the one that really, really stood out for me. I don't really even
He
have another. That one was just ridiculous.
he did say how he was like the second best point guard of all time, and then he also mentioned there later in the doc how the Pistons were his toughest team to ever play. So he did give some respect. But
Yeah,
Ryan,
I mean,
who
yeah,
did
there was a mild amount of respect, but it was very bare. It was the bare minimum.
yeah, I think he disrespected Clyde Drexler too, real quick. He disrespected him a lot, and we already talked about that. But
Right.
just saying how he was insulted that he was even in his same mentioned the same breath as Clyde Drexler. That was very disrespectful. But uh, Ryan, who did you think got attacked the most outside of I guess Isaiah and Clyde?
I got a Horace Grant wasn't directly attacked it, but that whole incident with the book. I mean,
Yeah, the Jordan Rules book. Yeah,
yeah, he got dragged through the mud on that. I mean, as well as Jerry Krause. Jerry Krause was attacked multiple times. He kind of made him look like an idiot. But yeah, going back to the whole Isaiah Thomas thing, that's the downfall of Jordan's competitiveness. At times, he could be really, really petty, and we saw that with how he,
yeah,
the whole iPad incident. So
yeah, and that was his pettiness again. I don't think we probably should have talked about that a little bit more, but that was kind of one of the reasons why he wasn't the best teammate. Um, but
Right.
yeah, I would have liked to hear a little bit more about the Horace Grant, Jordan Rule stuff. That was the part that I liked, and I would have liked to hear a little bit more about that. Yeah, so to kind of final kind of end this, kind of tie a nice pretty bow and put the cherry on top of this podcast. What was everyone's overall grade or opinion of this doc? I mean, did it meet the expectations? I mean, we've been hearing about this doc for about 2 years now. They moved the date up because of obviously the pandemic that's going on right now. A lot of people are saying it's the greatest doc ever. Do you guys agree with that, or what was your? So you give it a grade and then
Absolutely,
say
man.
like explain the grade, I guess. So Chris, you can go first because Ryan's been going first for the last few ones.
Um, yeah, I don't. I definitely don't think it's the best doc of all time. I think people are just starved for some sports. Exactly. I would give it a overall grade of about a B. I think it was good. I really enjoyed it. I was definitely captivated for most of it, but I think there was some bias. There were some people I wish were included. And I mean, a lot of that. A couple of the episodes, it had it where it was just all highlights from games that I already saw. I really like the behind the scenes footage, but I can watch most of those games and stuff. I mean, I know other documentaries have it like that too, but I give it a B. Good, not
Yeah,
amazing.
I would have liked more behind the scenes footage too. I mean, there was a lot of it obviously, but they did
Absolutely.
the way they talked it up. It sounded like there was going to be a little bit more. But Ryan, what's your overall grade?
Yeah, I agree 100% with Chris. I'm going with a B as well. I don't know. For me, when I turned off my TV on Sunday night at 11, I don't know. I kind of just felt like I wanted more from the series. I kind of felt
Yeah,
like,
Me too.
I don't know why, for whatever reason. And as we mentioned before, I just really didn't like how a lot of the teams and the players that we wanted to see were kind of left out of the docuseries. I would have liked to hear more of the great players that were also in the 90s. So, yeah, I wanted a little more from it.
yeah, I agree. I'll go B plus, and I kind of want to say inconclusive just because like Chris kind of touched on, just ask me again in a year when hopefully sports are back and I kind of rewatch this. It may be my opinion's kind of a little bit biased just because there's literally nothing else to watch aside from NASCAR, like I already mentioned, and UFC, I guess, if you're really into UFC. Um, but in terms of the greatest sports doc of all time, I still like the Bad Boys 30 for 30 more. Um, I like the Fab Five 30 for 30 more. So I'll give it a solid B plus. It was definitely really entertaining. I learned a lot from it, but kind of like you guys said, it did kind of leave me wanting a little bit more. And I even thought the ending was a little bit anticlimactic a little bit. I kind of wanted a little bit more dramatic of an ending. I liked the whole can in the fire thing and all that stuff, but um, wanted a little bit more. But yeah, any other final thoughts on the Last Dance, or maybe I should say last thoughts on the Last Dance, or
No, I wraps it up nicely in a nice little box for everybody. Kind of just summarizes the whole thing without deep diving each episode and being boring about it. We try to go over the more interesting stuff, and I enjoyed talking about it for sure.
yeah, I'm definitely probably gonna rewatch it, like I said, and really kind of
Me
see
too.
what maybe what I missed or some things that I kind of wanted to learn more about, and definitely do some additional research too. I've already kind of done that. But yeah, Ryan, any final thoughts?
Um, no, I just want to reemphasize how much I do not like Scottie Pippen because of this. I think it was great for Jordan, but I don't know. My opinion, Scottie Pippen was greatly diminished by this. So
Yeah, I agree with that for sure.
I agree. I agree. Well, thank you all for listening. Again, we are the Zone Defense Podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram and subscribe to us on YouTube. Um, we mainly talked about basketball this episode, but we're going to be talking about NBA and NFL mainly. Since this episode was all basketball, we're actually going to continue with the basketball theme with our next episode, which is going to be kind of a cool NBA 2010s players draft a little bit later this week, hopefully. And then we'll be back next week with some more NFL talk, kind of previewing some of the divisions, talking about the draft, and talking about some of the free agency moves that each team made. I believe we're starting with the AFC East division, so definitely be on the lookout for that. And also, in addition to subscribing to YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, search us anywhere you listen to your podcast: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, and wherever else you listen to your podcast on. Thanks for listening to episode one. We're Chris, Ryan, and Drew, and hopefully you listen to us again soon.